We are so thrilled to have a fantastic collection of young and rising leadership from the motion picture studios that run this town. Please welcome Sean Bailey, Doug Belgrad, Bill Bromley, Josh Goldstein, Sue Kroll, Greg Silverman, and Mark Weinstock. Come to the grill. Come on out. Wherever you like. Nobody wants to sit next to me? What's the deal? You're scared. Don't be scared. I won't bite. Or I'll bite all the way down the road. Fantastic. Wow. This is such a big deal because when I started the grill, I only wanted to have one-on-ones the whole time. I just want to we're going deep. We're not doing that thing where everybody just says 2 seconds and it's like nobody ever says anything real. But guess what? This is where we ended up because I'm just delighted to have the leading lights, smartest people running the movie business. And so thank you all for coming, and we're not going to be polite and let everybody just say their little sound bites. We're going to have an actual conversation. So let's just start out, and most of you I've known for a really long time, and you know I'm not polite anyway. So I want to start with this day and date conversation that's going on. Okay, so we had this little publicity flipper-flap in the past week, right, where the Weinstein Company and Netflix announced they're putting out Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and there's been some discussion over whether it was a publicity thing, and then the theaters came out and said, we're not so into this, and IMAX is going to put it on their screens, which is not going to be on any screens in the United States except for at science museums. So is this a meaningful moment in the whole day and date collapsing of windows, which is a trend that we've been seeing for years? Sue, I know you want to say something on that, so.
I knew you were going to do that.
Jump right in, Sue.
Yeah, looking right at you.
Okay, guys, please jump in. Of course, it's a very interesting moment at this point in time. And, exhibition, they're our partners. We make movies that are meant to be enjoyed and theatrical, great theatrical experience. We were talking about it earlier. It's not just a film like Gravity. Even Annabelle. Can you imagine? The communal experience that happened over the weekend. Look how well it did. I mean, everybody being terrified together. So that's very important.
Which you ran in your ads too, right?
What?
The ads showed people being terrified together. That was
because we had actual terrified people too. Yeah. So it all worked out. But it's interesting when you look at the weekend and, Gone Girl and Annabelle. I mean, people went out to see those movies in the theater, right? I mean, 2 very big openings, happily, right? Coming off of a very bizarre time in the summer. So it is an interesting time. And, we make films, intended for that experience. But, of course, the consumer and, all the changing trends and needs, that will dictate, we have to look at that. We're always reviewing that. So it is a very interesting point in time.
Is it inevitable? Yeah, jump on in, everybody.
I was just going to say that being the only independent on the panel, our business model, part of our business model is actually focused on the premium VOD window release. And so we see a strong future in that, and I think they can coexist, though. I don't ever think that the theater business is going to be gone. I just think it's a new way for people to view entertainment, and we've done it in the past, and it's been successful, so we hope it will continue.
Thought on this? I mean, windows aren't going away completely.
I think
and aren't the theaters just aren't they sort of whistling in the wind? I mean, they're going to have to come around?
I don't think that has to be the case. I think that we all kind of grew up and loved that movie-going experience, and I think that there's something kind of purely cinematic about it that will always be in that space in a kind of magical way. That doesn't mean that there aren't other ways to enjoy films, and as technology changes, I don't know necessarily that we've figured out what the windowing aspect of it all is, but I certainly think that technology has always had a role in sort of the evolution of the business, and it will again.
Mark, you have to deal with this over. I'm just curious. I mean, I went from the production presence too, but I mean, particularly you guys who have to release these movies and deal with the theaters, right? So.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's what we struggle with is people want the content when they want it, so we have to give it. We sort of, how do I explain this? we can't just change everything just to suit them, but we're going to have to make changes in order to eventually service that audience who is used to getting everything they want when they want it. We can't collapse the windows all of a sudden, so I think it's going to be a sort of a gradual change. But the consumers are talking, and they want it now, and we can't just say, oh no, you just wait 90 days or wait 120 days. So something will happen, but I think to drastically just say, all right, let's go day and date, I don't think we're ready, but I think it is eventually headed better.
Are you not ready? Meaning you as the content producer. And I'd ask from you, also I'd ask from Greg and Sean, what are you hearing from your perspective? Because you're dealing with the producers and the stars. I mean, they want those big billboards. They want those marquees, right?
I would say, I do think it's an interesting time. I do think it's a terrific time for content just in general. I think it's an exciting time to be a storyteller. But I think also, like a lot of conversations, I think that there are a lot of other factors and data points that don't get really talked about. For us, like many of us, we're focused on big movies. And if you don't take international into account and what these cultures want, that a lot of them to go to the big screen theatrical movie-going experience, and what we're seeing on these big movies and what the box office splits are of international domestic. I think you have to look at it not just as a domestic issue, but globally what's happening and what's the best thing for your business.
I would say that the studio economic model still definitely depends on a theatrical release. So there are other companies and new entrants into the market, Netflix, that are going to disrupt that model. But no question about it, if you can create content, and it's driving all of the studios, I think, to find theater-worthy movies to make, to be differentiated from things that people want to see streamed to their iPad or other portable device. So it's causing people to want to make bigger theater-worthy movies. And when the studios are successful at making and marketing those movies, the economic value for both the studio and any participant is much greater than going day and date.
But wouldn't that argue then for certain kinds of movies should go day and date, and Iron Man 3 should not? But the movies that so many of us in the industry love and are no longer being made because the business model, as you point out, doesn't make sense anymore. So I just interviewed Barry Levinson at the Toronto Film Festival, who said no studio would make Rainman today. Well, that's a loss for all of us as a society, as a cultural community.
Yeah.
You don't think that's true?
I don't think that's true. I mean,
Well, he did say it.
No, it is true that he said it.
Thank you. Thanks, Greg.
But, Rainman was an incredible theatrical experience. I remember going to see it, and part of the experience was being excited in the car on the way there, and, lining up to see the movie and going in and settling in and watching some great trailers for some other great movies, and then having this incredible experience with a few close friends and a few hundred strangers, and then walking out together and sort of talking about it. And we are making a lot of those movies. I mean, The Judge is an incredible movie that we have opening this weekend that's about people. Maybe that's what Barry's talking about, that, we believe that you can make movies about people and about real stories and about emotion, and movies that are intimate, that can still play as a great theatrical experience.
So I'd like to ask you a grilly question. If Robert Downey Jr. was not the guy that starred in so many big tentpole movies, would you still make The Judge with him?
Would we still make The Judge with
Robert Downey Jr., yeah.
If he wasn't such a big star?
No, he's
yes.
a big star, but he's a key guy in franchise movies, and so you want to be in business with Robert Downey Jr.
He was a key driver for us making the movie, for sure, but it wasn't, and his star power
I'd watch
great.
him read the phone book. I don't care. I love Robert Downey Jr. He's just an amazing actor. But
He's an amazing actor.
As were Tom Cruise and Dustin Hoffman when
at
they
the
made
time. Okay, so you're saying you would make Rainman came as a script to your desk.
If anybody has a script like Rainman,
with two of the greatest actors in the world.
No, seriously, we want it. We would like the Rainman screenplay.
And in fact, Doug
we will pay more for it.
But we will market it the very best. I promise you. We will get it out to the audience in the way that it needs to be.
I disagree.
Okay, please,
Josh.
But
you
yes.
may quietly walk to the edge of the stage and leave your script on the. They will be picked up and gathered.
But Jason Bateman isn't as big a star as Robert Downey Jr. but he was exactly the right guy for This Is Where I Leave You, and we were thrilled to make that movie with him. Yeah. And Downey is the perfect guy for that part, and he and his wife Susan developed it for him to start. So it's crafted for all the great things that he can do. But there's a part of it it's great to have someone in movies that people want to see, but he's exactly right for the movie. And Duvall, I mean, that's what's exciting to us. It is a movie like a Rainman movie, hopefully.
So let me throw it out to you.
Can I just say, underneath your question is sort of a presumption that great movies aren't getting made anymore in the theatrical system. And I don't think that that's true, number one. And number two...
I'm worried about that, I am.
Okay, well, I think all of these studios are still making at least one or two, ambitious dramas per year. And I think that a lot of great movies are still getting made. But here's the interesting thing is technology, which old establishment people like us can often be afraid of, is actually doing amazing things for content. So you have incredible television getting made on the cable networks and now the broadcast networks. And if day and date allows for movies to get made that might have been made by the studios 30 or 40 years ago, it doesn't mean the studios aren't still making interesting, ambitious, worthy product. I actually think the choices for the consumer are much greater. And as I think you said, or somebody on the panel said earlier, certain movies won't be day and date. Certain movies may go day and date. And other movies are going straight to cable or getting made. There was a whole sea change when HBO started making original content, and they're doing a lot of great stuff too. So I think artists and creators have many more avenues with which to find a way to make their movies and have them be seen. And the consumer is seeing more content than they ever have before. So there is a great deal of change, and we're all trying to deal with that, but it's not a bad thing.
Well, I would ask that. I mean, is that a conversation that you ever have? First of all, we cover movies and television, and the sort of leitmotif in television is it's the golden age of television. So much movie talent has decided to go work at the premium cable channels, and Netflix will throw money at top people, and you won't get any notes from Ted Sarandos, or you'll get nice job or what you know what I'm saying. And rightfully so, right? They're paying to get into the business. They want to, and not just Netflix. There are other entrants in that marketplace. We're talking about Amazon Studios, et cetera. So, I mean, is this a conversation you guys ever have among yourself? A worry that the best content is not coming to the big feature screen anymore, and that it's now maybe migrating to Stars and Showtime, et cetera, et cetera.
I think it's a worry from a marketing perspective because that's our competition. We're competing every day with Stars, Netflix, YouTube. More people spend time on YouTube than any other network. So that's our competition. That's what makes our job really hard in terms of, no, we're bigger, we're better. You have to see this in the theater. So.
I think that is true, but I think that the structure of cable television, and it is an exciting time in television, and there's no doubt about that, but that sort of novelistic structure is definitely a different kind of viewing experience. And there's something about a kind of 3-act cinematic experience from a kind of an emotional standpoint that makes movies really special. And certainly we all have our sort of favorite series, but when you think about sort of pieces of art that have affected you, and you think about that movie experience, you don't think about that episode of a show. I think there's just something about kind of a 3-act storytelling structure that really somehow the human animal just really responds to, and a theatrical environment and the immersion that that creates is really special. But I do agree with Mark that from a marketing standpoint, it becomes incumbent on all of us, who struggle, which is what makes this an urgent theatrical experience, and kind of unlocking that.
We call them babysitter movies.
You call them what?
Babysitter movies. You have to get a babysitter if you're going to get out of the house. It's $100 to get out of the house. You got to make it worthwhile.
Disney movies, you can take your kids.
Problem solved, Sue.
I think there's a place for all of this out there in the world. I love TV. I watch a lot of TV. But I think, like myself, there's a place, people want to go on the weekend to see a movie. I mean, you're not going to, if you want to see Gone Girl, you're going to go, or Annabelle. But you'll also watch The Nick, or whatever's happening, on Netflix. There's so many great entertainment options now. It's wonderful, and it's great for everybody. It's great for the business. I remember years ago, where we'd talk about TV personalities, and they, the world of TV and film was so divided. and how quickly it's changed, how everybody is doing everything. There are more opportunities for us as content developers and providers, and for all of these people who push content out. So I think it's an amazing thing. To the point about the marketing, absolutely. You know, people want, you have to create a different experience in the theater. People, even, you know, to Greg's point about the judge, we were there in Toronto, and you might think, you know, people might debate about, is a film like that, is that, you know, for a new era of theatrical experience, but having Downey and Duvall on screen, feeling the audience there, how they took it in, it certainly felt like a very big cinematic experience. And in selling it, that emotional connection, that urgency you create, that kind of, this is something I really want to experience in the theater, that's our job. But you can also enjoy it later on TV or on a plane or whatever you might do. But there is certainly a place for that, and there will always be a place.
Well, there can be. A movie like that, I mean, you're going to want to see that. If you miss that in the theater, you are at least aware that it exists. Yeah. And that is a great movie to watch on a weekend, on a Saturday night, and you can watch it on a small screen. You don't want to watch The Avengers on a small screen. You want to see that on a
or
big
The Hobbit or Gravity.
Or The Hobbit,
these
or
these
Gravity,
movies
right, exactly.
that you want to experience in the theater, so many of them.
Well, Gravity, I think, is sort of one of those really
it's very unique,
rare birds, just because it's a film that, I mean, you know, let's face it, I'm not telling you guys anything you don't know. As the discerning viewing public, you know, we feel like we're overwhelmed by superhero movies. It's a reality. You know it, we know it.
In a good way.
No, not in a good way. And I think that's partly what happened this summer. You're going to start seeing fatigue. The summer before that, we were seeing too many CG kids movies. It's like we all, you know, there's that. I understand why those movies got made. I absolutely understand that. But the question is, how do you find that balance? And if the judge doesn't do well for some reason at the box office, the question is, will you guys continue to make those movies?
It's
because
already a
it's
success
your job
for
to
us.
make the movies that are successful.
It's
Sorry,
already
Greg.
a success for us. I mean, we've been a part of a great movie, and we have two American icons on screen together giving these.
You don't have to sell me. I'm like, I'm in. I'm fine on it. It's not something you
She's
do.
going.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. But what I mean is that that's a victory.
We're always going to make these kind of movies.
Yeah.
To your point, always. There'll always be a place for them in the mix.
And we're very lucky we have this incredible, the company has this incredible appetite for variety.
I don't mean to pick on you guys, by the way.
We like being.
I don't feel picked on,
really.
and I don't
I'm
feel
kidding.
picked on at all. And you know, we love variety at our place. And you know, we have superhero movies, we have comedies, we have Magic Mike, we have horror movies.
So I'm just throwing out that idea of like this sort of surfeit of superhero movies, and
It sounds like you're picking on Feige, and he's not even here to defend himself.
Yeah, that's true.
I feel so bad for him.
Let's get a chair. Let's get Marvel up here.
Don't feel too bad for him.
Yeah, seriously.
I was being ironic.
But I look at a movie like Guardians of the Galaxy, which was in fact a superhero movie that was very different, and you know, was a set of characters that I didn't know about, and in fact it had, you know, relationships and a novelty to it that made it a new experience. And I think that the audience responded in that way. You know, it was an interesting and unlikely kind of mix of elements, and I think colleagues did an amazing job both making and marketing a kind of unexpected movie, you know, superhero movie that had really probably some of the most interesting characters of the summer kind of emerge, and I think that's exciting.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's, you know, that is a good example, and it did feel fresh, and it did feel new, and the question also is, is the public going to go to see characters they don't already know, which I think is also challenging, right? You guys are always under pressure to create franchises all the time, so that people have a familiarity and are going to want to go revisit, spend some time with the characters and the actors they already know. So I'm not saying that your job's not challenging. Mm-hmm. I'm just saying that from our perspective, you know, what it feels like as a viewer, you know, essentially. Let's talk a little bit about, Sean, I think it was you or someone mentioned the international box office. Maybe it was Josh. So that's now 2/3 of that worldwide number that we see, and it's only going up, and China's going to continue to keep taking market share in terms of that pie. So can we talk a little bit about how is the weight of that, the reality of that, impacting your decisions on when you're looking at movies, greenlighting movies, and thinking about your slate? I guess, Doug, you can, if you want to take a whack there.
Well, I mean, I think you've kind of said it, that, you know, international is hugely important. every decision has to be, you have to factor in the international potential of the project when you're deciding how much to spend on the movie and how to package the movie. I think one other facet to it that is worth pointing out is that not all international dollars are created equal. And what I mean by that is there are certain markets that have real ancillary value that come along with the box office. So Europe and a few other territories are much more like the United States in that, $1 of box office leads to a greater stream of revenue down the line. Whereas some of the new markets, Russia, China, parts of Asia, Korea, don't have highly developed ancillary markets, if they have ancillary markets at all. So I think it's important when you're composing a film's budget and looking at your overall slate that you be conscious of that if you're interested in profitability.
So do you do some kind of, you pencil out, is $1 at the European box office worth X more than $1 at the Chinese box office?
Yes.
Can you explain a bit?
Well, I mean, I think Doug just did in terms of, you look at the ancillary markets.
And what is it worth double? Is it worth triple?
Well, I think different markets, depending on your television deals, all have sort of different relationships. But I think, what'll be exciting is as those markets mature, they'll probably develop more. But I think the interesting thing also about international, at least that I'm discovering, is I think that there's a set of rules that have sort of been, R-rated comedies maybe don't travel or things like that. Right. And you look at a movie like The Hangover, which, Sue did, and, we looked at that and it was
or your very own Neighbors.
Well, that's where I was getting to, which is, a movie like, you wouldn't think that a R-rated Seth Rogen movie would have a lot of foreign appeal.
With a frat story.
Right, with a fraternity, which is a sort of an American cultural thing. But you can find by naming the movie Neighbors, there was something sort of inherently universal about that, no pun intended, and in fact that everyone has a lousy neighbor, and everyone a number of the the 10 Commandments are about being a good neighbor and not coveting thy neighbor's wife, and so in fact this niche R-rated movie had a very,
it's a morality tale, basically.
Exactly.
We didn't get
it's a very subtle morality tale, but it just means
but
it just means that there's really new opportunities to unlock things around the world, and that some of the old assumptions don't have to be, held on to. And I think that's really an exciting time to see the international marketplace as just a new ground for further, opportunity for people to enjoy our movies.
Go ahead.
Sean,
I was just going to say, same thing with Fault in Our Stars. On paper, this movie working overseas made
that did crazy overseas.
Yeah,
right?
we did.
That surprised
yeah,
me.
we did 320 worldwide. So on a $12 million movie, which was just amazing. And the 125 in the U.S. was great, but the 200 overseas was by far way surpassed expectations.
You might want to revive Shailene, perhaps.
Yeah, but it's the same thing that Josh is saying. It's a universal theme. The movie was so
great. Tell us about that movie. That is to me a very interesting movie. $12 million movie. I didn't know the production budget, but I knew it was low. Yeah. And to do that kind of number, that's a business,
Well, it's an anomaly.
It's an anomaly?
No, I mean,
how do you do that?
No, it's a fantastic movie. I mean, you go to the first research screening and it tests 97 and everyone's crying, including us. And you're like, wow, this movie
is the 97?
Exactly. And and you just know you have it. You know you have something really special. And domestically, we were very confident. Internationally, everyone who saw it was sold. So it just said we have an opportunity here, and for that kind of movie to work overseas.
But why wouldn't a love story? I mean, because you sold it as a love story, not a dying cancer girls or whatever. Or you sold it as this very broad, universal. It was a beautiful movie, and you sold it. I thought very well.
It's a relationship that anyone can understand.
But why wouldn't that play overseas? I think that I would think.
There's just never been a case for a movie to take off like that.
But you also, I think the other thing, you're contending with a few things. These guys have had some magnificent kind of breakthroughs, but I think it connects back to your big movie question, which is local language production in a lot of these markets has really, really improved. They've got many more movies, some terrific movies that are relevant to their culture with their own stars. We here have seen a decline in home entertainment. You combine those two things and we say, what can we go do globally where it is harder for those markets to compete on a regular basis, and that's spectacle. And that spectacle with, as you say, perhaps some built-in, brand equity or a known intellectual property. And so I think that's why you are seeing the global impact is make big movies where these local markets, they can make some pretty good love stories and they can make some pretty good comedies. It's very hard for them to go make a Gravity or an Avengers.
Yeah.
But could I pick up, yes, there are movies that are anomalies where a small budget, creates great opportunity. But the amazing thing you realize is that the audience actually doesn't care how much we spend on making a movie. They actually care on what the movie is, what the experience it offers. And we've seen, we've had kind of wonderful success with our micro-budget movies, where in fact a little movie like The Purge with a very small budget, in fact, can have a real impact both here and abroad. And I think that what's exciting is that the audience, they have a sense of where the connection is and what's real for them. And I think that's, again, what makes, the new environment of the movie business there's sort of new ways and new models to kind of to express ourselves.
These local movies, by the way, so is that, one of the things we talked about yesterday with Frank Cooper, the CMO of Pepsi, who was here, because they're actually making content themselves now, and Red Bull Media was here. They're making content. They don't need you guys. They're gonna have their own relationship with the artist. One of the things he said that sort of struck me was that he felt that there was a market failure by Hollywood to respond to people's desires to be seeing things on mobile. And you're in the business of putting out things on big screens, and what you could argue that that's somewhere that you have to find a way to connect. The audience is growing on mobile, and all of your future customers. Mark, you and I talked about this, about how you get those millennials, right, that used to be the most avid moviegoers all the time, those 13-year-old boys. How do you think about how to get to those people and find a way to get your content on that little screen? Your job is to get on the big screen, I get that, but everybody's watching on that little screen. How do you guys think about that?
I had a real-world experience a couple months ago. It was a birthday party, and it was like my 10-year-old nephew and my 12-year-old half-brother, and it was an event, and they were watching someone play a video game. I was like, what is that? They go, oh, it's on we're on Twitch. Everyone's on Twitch. I'm like, what is this Twitch? So I talked to George.
Gave you a Twitch, actually.
Yeah, I said, what is all the, he goes, oh yeah, all the boys are on it. I'm like, well, for Maze Runner, we have to do a huge thing with them. He's like, okay, great. And we did, and it was a big part, like that's where they are. And you have to find this audience, because they're not, some of them are watching TV, some aren't. They're scattered, they're everywhere, and you have to go where they are. And the marketing can't be, oh, let's just put a TV spot in front of their small screen, because they'll just close it as fast as they can open it. You gotta create content that they're gonna go, oh, this is cool, this is in the world. So we did a Minecraft trailer based on Maze Runner, where people watch it and go, oh, that's cool, oh, I wanna see this movie. You just can't throw TV spots and just hope they come see it.
Onto mobile, right.
Yeah, it has to be a huge part of marketing strategy for pretty much every film. Obviously, if it's an older skewing film, it's a different thing. But, it's interesting with mobile because, for example, in Asia, I mean, that's where they get all their information about a movie. So you really have to be able to crack it. And like you say, the answer isn't putting a 2.5-minute trailer on. So the challenge is, of course, because the materials you create have to be the most effective, to create that immersive experience, connect emotionally, do all that. So even though you want to create a sense of pervasiveness and a sense of event, and you create a lot of content, you also have to make sure that you're quickly connecting, you're telling them a little bit about the story, all the things that motivate people to go to the movies, you have to figure out how to do it in little bits. So you're creating a cumulative kind of experience for people. I remember, I don't know how many years ago, but I used to think, oh, nobody's going to really make a decision just on this one thing. But that's not the case at all. But you have to be there, and it's, what you did was very, very inventive, and we have a lot of aggressive, between social, being on every platform, you still need conventional media, you still need to be in theaters, you still need to be on television, but you have to be talking to people in that way. So it's a big part of every strategy, and becoming much more mainstream, I think, all over the world.
What about, that's on the marketing side.
Yeah.
Do you think it all, I don't know if people are actually watching movies on their phones. Do you have evidence if they are?
Don't.
I mean, is that something?
I can't imagine.
Well, I mean, the phones are getting, let's put it this way, the phones are getting bigger,
No. Well, yeah.
The phones are getting bigger.
Yeah.
Those screens are kind of beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's safe to say that people are watching movies on every screen.
On everything, right? I think that, yeah, I think they are. So I mean, I wonder how that impacts how you think about the kinds of movies you're making, because ultimately, if people are going to buy, buy their movies or buy out of iTunes, do you really care if they're watching it there?
We make them for the big screen. We make them for the big. We make them.
You have to make them for the big screen.
That's how we make them.
Yeah. Okay.
But you're happy if someone's renting or buying them so they can watch it on their handheld device later.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the evidence, one of the most interesting pieces of evidence is that we've done some research about DVD or digital copies that are bought by the consumer. Mm-hmm. I think the number is 70% of the people who actually buy a home entertainment copy have already seen the movie in the theater.
Right.
So I think...
What segment of that are family-oriented or kids' movies? Big segment,
I don't know what
right?
the breakdown is demographically.
Right.
But the point that I would make is that the job for the studios is make theater-worthy content, get people into the theater, everything else takes care of itself. I think people are consuming a great deal of content on their mobile devices. Some of it obviously is movies. A lot of it is much more bite-sized content, so it's things that people like Crackle or Maker Studios are making. And there's marketing content that goes with that as well. And I think the sort of sweet spot at the moment is make theater-worthy content and market it in a really entertaining or interesting way where people live in small bite-sized pieces.
Right.
Like
that sounds smart.
what Mark did at Fox.
Let's talk about social for 1 minute. And I promise I'm going to open the floor for questions because I know there's going to be a lot of them. Social. Okay, so it seems clear to me, certainly on TV shows, and it seems to me on movies, that movies are getting made and cast with a clear awareness of social. So, truth or dare, like truth-telling moment. Mm-hmm. Are you casting movies, for those of you on this panel who are casting movies, with an eye to the social footprint of the actors in the movie?
Yes.
No. We are not.
That was not rehearsed. I can be specific. I think it depends. I think it depends on the movie.
You next.
I think it depends on the movie.
Mark just said on the tiebreak.
Wait, before they explain, do you have a yes or a no?
We don't. Marketing weighs in on when we look at these things. We talk to our colleagues in marketing and certainly what their impact will be across all platforms, how they feel their impact is going to be. That's part of the conversation. So it's a data point, but only as it kind of comes from how marketing feels. We don't look at it as we cast the best people we think in the part.
My point is, I think it depends on the movie. So, for example, we have a picture coming up in January from Screen Gems, Clint Culpepper's label, and it's a Kevin Hart vehicle called The Wedding Ringer. It's an R-rated comedy. It's about a buddy relationship that he has with Josh Gad. It has a lot of heart. It's very funny. There were secondary parts that were cast with the social reach of the other actors in mind because that is a marketing-driven decision, and the movie turned out great. But those movies made at that price point. It's about, is there a marketable...
What's the price of the movie?
Under 20.
Under 20? It's not cheap.
Under 20.
Under 20. I thought you said 120. I was like,
that'd be a lot for a Kevin Hart movie.
No.
We hope it grosses around there, though.
Okay. And so it made sense to do that.
We factored that in because it was part of how we're going to sell the movie.
Yeah, to Greg's point, look, it's great if somebody we happen to cast in a film who's right for the part has a great social presence, or even, more conventionally, somebody who can get booked on, talk shows, be on the cover of magazines, whatever it is, that whole mix. But it certainly doesn't drive anything. And, I don't want to be specific about it, but even we've had a lot of people who have very big social, footprints. They tweet every day or something, and it hasn't made a difference. It hasn't provoked people. It hasn't
made a difference.
No, and, people have to want to see the film, and all those kinds of bells and whistles. It's like we've talked. I know you and I have talked a lot about this, about sort of what drives, what motivates, what's the most persuasive, and you can tick all those boxes, and you can have somebody who has millions and millions of followers. But if the combination of things is not right, and people don't care about that person in that movie or whatever, it's not going to matter. Yeah. You have to get the whole mix of it right, and that alone is not enough. Because even for word of mouth, well, some famous person says, "Go see the movie." I can tell you, unless everything else is working, it doesn't matter at all.
I completely agree with Sue, but I also think there are times when you look at movies where You know, you have someone like a Vin Diesel who has one of the largest, followings of any, star and in his social space, and you look at a kind of movie that has a fan base like a Fast and Furious, and there can be a great opportunity to have that kind of authentic relationship with your fans, to put materials out in that way, and it does create and kind of really foster this real kind of intimacy and interaction with a franchise over time and a group of actors and the sort of familiar relations. But I completely agree with Sue that there are times when just having someone with a lot of followers doesn't mean that they're going to be excited about a movie.
I think you also...
By the way, I think it's, not to have any, I just think it's so interesting because I've had people from Twitter and Facebook here on this stage arguing the exact opposite. So
of course.
I love to get this
of
kind of real...
They are.
I know, I know,
yeah.
And I understand that I know where they work and I know what they do, but
right.
I mean, it's great to have this kind of...
There's a different facet to it, though, which I think is from a production perspective. There's the kind of the offensive, and then there's also, if you're making a movie, you want to be able to introduce materials ideally as you would like to introduce materials. So if we look at what Lucasfilm is experiencing now with Star Wars, or what Marvel goes through on many other movies, you would like to be able to say, well, we want to introduce this content at a time and place of our choosing, and you don't always get that luxury with the world as it's evolved.
Right.
So there's both an offensive aspect to it, and there's a defensive aspect to it, because you don't want the story necessarily told of your production all the way up to your first trailer.
I mean, I think that's a great example because that Star Wars table read photo, that just went crazy viral. Crazy. And you guys have been very selective, I think smartly selective about what you're putting out on that, because the anticipation and the expectations are very high. Anticipation is going to be off the charts. So you want to feed that, but not too much. I mean, that's got to be tough.
JJ's really good at it. JJ's really good.
Yeah.
But further to that, to the point you're both making, it's because it was authentic. And that's the thing, Josh, what you're saying. If it doesn't feel real, and there isn't a real connection, and people aren't comfortable with what they're doing, and if the kind of things that go out don't feel different, people dismiss them. If it feels too promotional. That photograph, we looked at that and went, shit.
No, it was completely...
Right. And look, you felt like you were there, right?
Yeah,
You felt
what
like
a
you
fantastic
were at,
strategy, so not on the nose in the world of like people feeling manipulated and handled. There has to be a way in that's organic and real.
Yeah. But to that point, it's all about authenticity. And, all of us are in the business of creating magic for people. And so that magic is so much more important than anybody's social reach. I mean, we had our choice of, everyone in town wanting to play the female lead opposite Will Smith in Focus. And this woman walked in and did an audition with him that just took everybody's breath away. And, she'd been in one movie, but, no one really knew who she was. She was the exact Margot Robbie.
Well, she was in Wolf of Wall Street.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She was in Wolf of Wall Street, and but there were people who had huge social footprints. There were people who were huge movie stars. She had this magic, and it was a chemistry between her and Will. And then you go to the the test screenings, and we have that similar Fault in Our Stars experience where you have this energy and rock concert experience at a test screening that you can only get with the magic of authentic, great actors with a great screenplay and great directors and the great music and everything all perfectly together. That's so much more powerful than someone having a certain number of Twitter followers.
Agree. And they can sense it. John Lasseter, our colleague at Pixar, has a great quote, which I love, which is, "Quality is the best business model." And I think that speaks to social media too. They can tell when you mean it. And I think when you try to get tricky or cute, you get hurt.
They can tell.
Yeah, I think, just to say that one last thought on social, I mean, I think you talk about people who have social footprints, but there's another kind of litmus test about social, which is this a movie, a concept, an authentic moment that people will share, organically? And I think that there's a real difference between buying and then sharing. And are things share-worthy becomes a bit of a way of kind of understanding, does this idea have the substance, does the moment have that authenticity, does the magic of that relationship pop off the screen in such a way that once you have it, is it worthy of identifying yourself and going to a friend and saying, look at this?
And you don't want to give it away either if it's that really key moment on screen. You don't want to give it away.
I'm just saying, but it's a new way of kind of judging and understanding kind of how content moves in the world, that it's not about pushing it with dollars, it's about a kind of a new ecosystem.
I want to hear from Bill on the social footprint question on indie films, because that's a different, you guys have to really try to break through, and you don't have the marketing dollars that Sue has or that, that
Right,
Josh has.
that's correct. And in fact, it becomes a lot more important because one of the challenging things, just going back on breaking the windows, is getting the talent engaged. Because the talent traditionally wants to see their film on the big screen. And when you get A-list talent involved in a project where you're breaking those windows, it's an education process. And we spend a tremendous amount of time with the agents and the talent themselves trying to get them educated on this new platform system. And that in combination with their engagement in the social media space is hugely important to the success of the films. So it becomes very important on the smaller films because we don't have the budgets.
Yeah. All right, I want to open it up because I don't want to lose everybody. And if Sean, for any reason you feel like you're going to miss your plane, you say so. Okay, let's please stand up and go for it. Yeah.
Hello. With the success of female-driven movies like The Hunger Games and Fault in Our Stars, now Gone Girl, do you foresee a greater number of female-driven movies being made?
We hope so.
In the future?
For sure. We hope so. I mean, we had The Other Woman as well, which was, I think, 72% female. I mean, it's an underserved audience completely, and we're surprised there's not more movies made to serve that audience.
Gravity.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, we think there's a big future and actually a big hole in female-driven films. We have our first film with Saban Films opens up in November. It's Hilary Swank starring in a film called The Homesman, and we have tremendous hopes for her and the film. She's terrific in it.
We at Disney, we really love the space. We've been there for a while with Alice in Wonderland or Maleficent or the upcoming Cinderella, certainly on the animated side. So we believe in big bets with empowered female protagonists.
Yeah. So when we have Pitch Perfect will be coming out this summer, and we're working on 50 Shades of Grey. So you just see.
I mean, part of the problem is that superhero movies do not favor female characters. Let's just be honest, right? I mean, and you guys make a lot of those.
Well, I don't think that's totally fair in the sense that we.
I'll send you a breakdown of the numbers, and people do count them. And,
we had the experience of Lucy, which was not necessarily a branded superhero movie, but it was about an empowered female character whose brain was enhanced and had kind of superhuman-like powers, and it was a very, very small movie made for
Is that a franchise? Do you think? Is that a potential franchise?
You know what? You never know exactly where she ended up at the very end of the movie. We shall see, but you see just that a female-driven, kind of action-oriented but still interesting movie went on to do $400 million around the world. So. Pretty amazing things can happen, and I don't think it's quite fair to just say, yes, maybe there's been less female superhero protagonists to date, but that doesn't mean that there can't be more of them.
I agree, there can be more of them.
The Ghostbusters are coming.
Please, go ahead. You stand up, do you mind?
Oh, sorry. Mine's a little more of a potentially controversial statement than a question, but any of you can answer it, so I'll just make the statement. The movie theater helped to resuscitate the movie business? Yes or no?
The movie theater?
The movie theater.
Could you say a little bit more?
The consumer experience in going to a movie theater helped to resuscitate and save the movie business. So thinking about how the theaters, the distributors, have taken steps to make the movie-going experience, the actual going out and purchasing tickets, a better experience for the consumer, how that has impacted the movie business. What if I asked it that way?
I think he means like premium tickets and seating in advance and alcohol in theaters and that sort of thing, I think you mean?
Yeah, exactly. Just how the movie-going experience has changed.
I mean, the box office is basically, attendance over time is going down. The dollar figure overall is either steady or going up, largely because of the price of 3D tickets. So. I don't know. Do we really know if I don't know if there's enough of theaters that have implemented this kind of premium experience that we can really tell if it's moving the needle. That's my thought, but you guys would know better.
I mean, I go all over town. I go to the movies a lot, and I go and sample all the different theater experiences.
Yeah.
And at a theater that doesn't have reclining seats and people that bring me food, the movie's great. It's really enjoyable. And you know, some of the premium theaters offer great amenities, and it's a really great experience.
But they're expensive.
They're expensive. So I do think it's nice that people have a choice, and I think that's great. But I do think they're choosing based on the content.
I mean, one of the things we did a series about this summer was about the Hispanic audience and how fast that was growing. They're huge theater goers. And I wouldn't have thought that the premium experience is really for them, because it can be like $25 per seat to do that. So I guess one question might be is, what are you all doing to help nourish the fastest growing market and your fast growing domestic audience? I
think it goes back to what Greg said. I mean, the better the theater going experience, the more likely someone is to want to go to the theater, but it's about the content, and that's what it's about for the Hispanic audience. When you make movies and by the way, it's not a monolithic audience. There are, you know, subsets within the Hispanic audience, but generally, it's more a multi-generational movie-going experience. So family movies typically do better for that audience, and I think everyone's sort of conscious of that, and you make movies, you try to make movies that are good and authentic, as has been said on the panel before, with an eye towards the marketplace and who your audience is. I don't think that the premium movie-going experience has dramatically altered the economics, but I think a distribution executive might be better able to speak to that. But I go to my in-laws live in Texas, and my family's from Chicago. I'm attending theaters in the Midwest in the middle of the country from time to time. I wouldn't say that the premium movie-going experience is sort of a phenomenon across the country yet.
Yeah, and you could argue that if the Hispanic audience is the fastest growing audience and they're a middle income demographic in general, then that's not going to impact that, right? And you could even argue the rising price of tickets has a negative impact on helping to encourage that audience going.
The interesting thing about pricing of tickets is that as a out-of-the-house entertainment experience, movies are still a pretty good value. Prices have gone up over time, and certainly 3D and IMAX and premium theaters drive the price up even further. Yeah. But the bulk of movie-going is still sort of at the basic price point, and, you know, everyone talks about how expensive it is to get a babysitter, and, you know, it's hard to get people out of the house. But for the right movie, it's still a pretty good value for the consumer and for families.
And it does get to what Mark and Sean were talking about, too, is some movies are, you know, babysitters included in the price, and some movies aren't. And that can affect things, too, and how much value you get out of that. If it's an alternative to going to a theme park or doing something like that, or
a hockey game, or... Yeah,
I mean, I'd be hard-pressed to come up with what's a cheaper experience, out of the home. You know, certainly anything out of the home, you're going to have the babysitter question. So I think there is great value in movies, so long as the content is good and and you're excited.
That's right.
Right. I mean, I'm also a big believer. I had many moguls say to me over the years, like, Tom Sherrick used to say, the best marketing for the movie industry is a good movie. You go to the movie theaters, you enjoy the movie, you see 3 trailers you like, it's going to propel you to want to go again. But it's got to be affordable to go twice a month or 3 times a month, which is really what we like. Okay, I'll be quiet.
I miss Tom Sherrick.
You miss Tom Sherrick. We miss Tom Sherrick. Rest in peace. Go ahead, up front. Can we give him a microphone?
Earlier, you guys spoke about creating theater-worthy movies. I'm curious to hear what your guys' definition is of what a theater-worthy movie is, especially in light of the success of Fault in Our Stars, which is made for so little money.
Can I just also add, this is Seb Ohani, and he made a 2-minute movie on Google Glass. You might want to meet him.
What was it?
What do you guys define as a theater-worthy movie?
I think where you benefit from having a communal experience. I think that can be an emotional experience, that can be a visually overwhelming experience. I think where obviously there's format and Atmos sound and 3D and all the choices we were just discussing, but I think, Fault in Our Stars, I think audiences loved going together and experiencing that emotion collectively. And so I think that the definition comes down a little more to story and emotional engagement than any kind of specific tech spec.
And personal preference, what you're looking for. If you want to laugh and go see a comedy, or if you want to be scared and go see a horror film, or you want to have a communal experience and see a movie like Fault or a big Avengers-style movie, it depends what you're looking for, but those are the theater-worthy experiences that will get you out of the house. And you have to be part of that crowd. And I think that's what social media, we kind of touched on it earlier, it's not about individuals, it's about what Josh was saying, it's really about the concept. Like, and when you see a commercial, you see an ad, and you're like, oh my God, we got to go see this movie together. That's how it starts. And I think that's what makes it a theater-worthy experience. You know, everyone in that theater is going to be all ready for that exact experience you're all going to have. And that's why people go to the movies.
But I think it is interesting as marketers that it does start with the story. There has to be something in that initial concept or story that touches something human in you, whether it's the human need to cry, to laugh, but it does come down to what about that concept, what is that saying, and what does it offer me as a consumer and as someone who wants to be kind of immersed in that story. And I think you got to ask yourself that at the very, very beginning, and then all the other stuff kind of comes along throughout the process.
It's easier to be transported in the movie theater and to really get out of your own way. And, you know, the lights go down and you really are dedicated to that experience, and that's really powerful.
Yeah, but you're competing with free a lot. That's tough.
But that is one of the things that is so unique about it, which the other devices don't necessarily get you, you know, which is you don't stop a movie to go to the bathroom, you know, you don't pick up a phone call in the middle of it, and that is something very special about it. But, you know, it doesn't mean that in other, you know, lines down the road that there are other ways to experience it, but there is that primal, fantastic way that it is very pure.
So what is a story that you really want to get lost in? It's sort of both of your points.
Yeah.
You know, and that's something that's theater worthy, and you just want to get taken away to a different world, an intense emotional experience.
Down here we have a question. Get a mic.
Hi, coming back to the Hispanic market, what I'm interested in is like how much, because beyond multi-generational and family movies, there's a firm belief that with the fastest growing market, films like Fast and Furious or films like, you know, other films have really made an impact at the box office thanks to the US Hispanic market. And having worked in that field for my entire life, I'm just wondering what's the approach beyond Universal that is very avid, and I know Warner Brothers too. I just want to know how much is it as a part of the equation when you're like producing films or the marketing, you know, because it's a very different place today where it was 20 years ago. So I didn't hear the answer earlier, so that's why.
I'll start as someone from Universal or Warner Brothers. It's an extremely important part of the audience. So we go after them aggressively on Apes and X-Men this past summer. It was a huge portion of our audience. And you know, the Hispanic audience is a very assimilated audience. It's not like you have to create content just for them. They want to be part of the big deal. Let's go. I want to see the big movie this weekend. And that's our job, is to make it such an event that everyone has to go see it. So I don't think it's so much like, here's the specific Hispanic message. I think there's places to reach them that are different than a general audience. But the message is usually the same. And in the case of those films where it's a big, broad movie you have to go see in the theater that weekend. That's how we approach it.
I think, you know, the theme that I'm feeling throughout the entire panel is authenticity and, you know, quality. And I think being conscious of where the audience is and trying to make movies in an uncynical way to reach them is important. So we had a small movie. It didn't have the worldwide success of Fault in Our Stars, but it was pretty successful domestically, called Heaven is for Real, which was made based on a true story and a best-selling book. And it was made to reach a faith-based audience, and a significant segment of that audience was Hispanic, so we subtitled the movie and we ran it, you know, specifically in certain theaters for that audience with those subtitles in the United States. So I think just being conscious of all audiences and how they want to consume your movie, but doing it in a respectful, authentic way is probably the best way to approach any audience.
And I would say, you know, at least our approach is, to some degree, we agree with what Mark's saying in that there is a singular message that works for everyone, but there is a case that there are certain cultural aspects of, you know, of the Hispanic culture, and I was, you know, it was kind of an amazing thing when I showed up at Universal and they had, you know, a really talented executive in that area who was, you know, an Hispanic, you know, multicultural expert, and I've learned a lot from him. And the ability to both be mainstream, but also to be a little niche and to find those opportunities to maybe on the edges or to expand that or to speak in that kind of authentic language just creates more opportunity. And I think it is about connections and figuring out how to make those connections.
Did you want to say? Yeah, please.
Yeah, I just want to add, you know, we have the same situation. You know, we market very specifically to Hispanic audiences. We have a team of people in-house, and that is, you know, their sole job responsibility. So you're right, the broader strategy, you know, everybody's going to the movies for the same reason, but how you get them and where you get them and when. And that's what we tailor. So we have a lot of very specific targeted activity. And then if we do have a movie star, somebody in the film that has, you know, more specific appeal, and we will use them and put them out there. But we have a lot of grassroots activity on every film. I mean, Annabelle, just this past weekend, had a very, very aggressive campaign in that regard.
And
so,
did it pay? I mean, did
yes.
it, in that audience in particular, it did? Yeah.
Yeah, so, you know, so it's different for every movie, but it's a ground-up, customized strategy for each and every movie.
And Jeff said last night that you sent the doll around.
Yes, yes, we were talking about it, which is like, and it's a true story. We were laughing.
It's a true story that you damaged the head.
No, you know, we were talking about. I mean, the fact, you know, the film was so, you know, cost effective, but also the publicity. You know, no private jets, hair and makeup. Annabelle went around in a box, and when she arrived at the last destination, she was damaged. They had somebody repairing her arm and her head. But other than being very mean-spirited, she's, you know, she does a lot of work.
Yeah, okay.
Not a lot of money.
Couple more, then we got her wrap. Any other questions? This side, oh yeah, back there, sorry. Hard to see you.
Thank you. Actually, following your question about grassroots, I remember just 10 years ago how the second the movie was out, you had a product placement at Denny's, at Burger King, and I'm just wondering, what is product placement? How are you guys making money from merchandising these days?
Question.
It's not really, for us, it's not really about making money on the product placement. I mean, it can offset production costs, but for us, it's the promotional back end. If a company gets involved early, we look for them to do a big promotional deal with us on time of release. So it's not so much about getting the dollars back to us, but sort of their brands promoting our movie.
Okay.
But you always want that mix and that kind of connection to feel, again, organic, authentic, real. Because when because when it feels false, just because when it feels false, you're actually not going to sell. You know, it's going to be a disservice to both, and it's not going to work.
But is it my imagination, or are those kinds of like big partnerships happening less? The McDonald's and the Burger Kings, and you're going more perhaps grassroots. Is that my imagination? Okay, it's my.
I think they're both.
So. My imagination. Okay. Star Wars. I know you guys will probably have some big partnerships on. Sure, they're probably lined up.
Like they need them.
Yeah.
Will you guys do merchandising for Star Wars at all?
We're gonna have some thoughts.
Yeah, exactly. Not in the gift bags. Okay.
Newsflash.
Any more? Okay, fantastic. Well, I have like 10 more questions, but I know you guys got to go. Thank you so much. What a
Thanks
fantastic
for having us.
conversation.
Thank you.
Really great. So smart. Thank you.